You've seen the marches in many Western cities. Immigrants, the left, and discarded and ignored women are all calling for a ceasefire. They cite exaggerated statistics for sure, but there's no doubt many civilians are dying in Gaza. Almost unbelievably, some are ignorant of what happened on October 7th to spark the conflagration. But children are dying, so we should stop the conflict, right? Well, no, we should not, and here's why. The Hamas attacks of October 7th are called terrorism, and whilst they're undoubtedly terroristic, strictly speaking, they were a war crime. Terrorism is typically conducted by non-state entities such as the IRA, for example. However, when the German Air Force attacked Rotterdam in 1940, this was terror bombing, it was terroristic, but strictly speaking, it was a war crime because it was perpetrated by the German government. Similarly, the October 7th attacks were perpetrated by Hamas, and they are the de facto and de jure government in Gaza. So, the attacks were a war crime, not terrorism. Now, when a war starts, there are two possible outcomes. Either the sides fight each other to a standstill, or they lose foreign military and financial support, in which case there's some kind of peace deal. Or one side wins and one side loses. In the latter case, the victors usually dictate terms, but they don't always do so effectively. In 1918, for example, the German army still had many men in the field, but they were beaten. They were out of money, they were out of equipment, people were starving at home. They were on the verge of collapse. So the Allied powers were rather foolish to grant Ludendorff an armistice. It's well known that malicious entities in post-war Germany were able to spread the myth the German army was unbeaten, and we know what happened in 1939. Similarly, in 1814, the Congress of Vienna did not prevent a resurgent Napoleon from unleashing war on the continent again in 1815. The lesson is clear. When you have your opponent at your mercy, you must destroy him. In 1945, it was impossible for a German to look around and conclude they'd not lost the war. In 1918, this was a widely held view. So, learning these lessons, there should be no ceasefire. Israel should continue to fight until Hamas surrender. Now, when a government surrenders, the army is disbanded, the politicians who played leading parts in the war are arrested and subject to war crimes trials, and the successful country takes over the civil administration of the defeated country until such time they can be trusted to run their own affairs again. Imperial Japan, for example, was nothing more than a military dictatorship. Its people were propagandized to hate the West and wish to die for the emperor. However, after a few years of American governance in Tokyo, together with the complete annihilation of the country in war, militarism was abandoned. So it was in Germany, and so it can be in Gaza. Hamas offer nothing but hatred, unrealistic goals, further bloodshed, further death, further destruction. They took over governance in 2007, and by now Gaza Strip could be Singapore. Instead, it's 1945 Dresden. As for the murderous billionaire leaders hiding in Qatar, well, Mossad was able to track down Eichmann and bring him back for trial. No reason they couldn't do the same much closer to home. Hamas sparked the latest round of conflict on October 7th with the attacks. They clearly hoped to draw the IDF into a sustained urban war, but this strategy has failed. The war can now only end in one way, with the total unconditional surrender of Hamas. So no ceasefires, no humanitarian corridors, no mercy missions, no two-state solution fantasies, and no peace deals Hamas will never stick to. We all know this will just mean another round of killing at some point in the future. Hamas have failed. They offer nothing. Their time is up, and the war must continue until their total, unconditional surrender. This is now within Israel's grasp. It would be a generational mistake not to finish the job.